right, so we are going to have a conversation today about what it looks like to redeem the time, particularly during this season of disruption that we've got with coronavirus, everybody isolated, everybody kind of pushed to their different corners in order to stay away from everybody, and work looks different for a lot of people. And so a lot of folks are going to have questions as far as what is the best use of this time? How do I, and then particularly as followers of Jesus, we've got to ask the question, like, what does it look like to be faithful to Christ during this time? Not just how do I get work done at work? Not just, how do I stay sane, inside the four walls of my house for, weeks on end, but like, how do we honor Christ during this time? And so I've got Christy Britton, who is our coordinator for our discipleship classes and all things discipleship at IDC, and then also Matt Sigmon, executive pastor at Imago Dei Church, and then my name is Shane Shaddix. So we're gonna just kind of kick this around a little bit today. Welcome, guys. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
All right, so we kind of tentatively titled this as Redeeming the Time. Let's start off with maybe a quick definition of, this doesn't have to be an academic discussion, but like when you think of redeeming the time, first of all, just give us a basic understanding. What does it mean to redeem the time? Matt, what comes to mind for you?
I think stewardship for me may not come as a surprise for me to talk about stewardship, but I think so many things in our life, really everything good in our life is a gift from the Lord. And so whether that's finances, employment, our homes, our cars, other material things, possessions are all gifts to be stewarded, used, invested, and enjoyed for God's glory, our good. Our time is the same. So the minutes, the days, and even the weeks that we have here, not just during this season, but our entire lives are gifts from the Lord to be enjoyed, and also used and invested for His kingdom work. And so for me, to redeem the time means to steward that resource well, to enjoy the gift that it is, but also to use it well.
That's good. Christy, anything else that you would add to that?
Yeah, I think same. I think there's a challenge right now to think big picture and constantly and consistently, and not just zoom in on the day-to-day ever-changing information coming out. And so, we have a responsibility to live purposeful lives every day, no matter what's going on. And so I think there's just a danger in sort of being super reactive to every hyper-second and new, news conference that comes out. Like, our lives are not our own. We belong to another. And it's always been, each day we live to Him and to His glory. And so the challenge today is, when the world has got us super focused on these singular events, like to look at the big picture, to be setting our mind on things above, not on the things of the earth. What does that look like today when the things on the earth are really, tyranny of the urgent style?
Right. Yeah, that was gonna be my next question, is just, and I've already hit on this a little bit and you did as well, but like, what challenges are you guys seeing in this particular time when kind of the shutdown during coronavirus is kind of slowly, well, not so slowly, coming upon us? Why right now in particular do you guys see it as important to think about redeeming the time?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember this is going to be a season, and while I think many of us have been kind of in reactive mode, we've been watching the news, social media, kind of reacting to this, to the everyday, even almost every minute updates about things. It's going to be helpful for us to get in a routine, to be less reactive, more proactive, plan things out as best we can. I think we will always, during this season, need to respond to things. But one of the other elders, Zach, said something like this the other day, that this is not a blizzard. It's more like a winter. So in other words, this is not a storm. This is more like a season for us. And so that means let's begin to get in a groove as best we can with schedules and routines and organization that obviously look a lot different than what they have for probably most of our life. But they still can be embraced, and we can still have good routines, good organization, and use the time wisely, again, even if it looks differently. And that means, I think, choosing not only what we do, but what we not do. And so we're, again, myself guilty of this as probably anybody. I think we have to be really careful of being of the tyranny of the urgent, if you've heard that term, and just constantly reacting, and even, I think, anticipating what the next story is going to be and what the next action is going to be. I mean, to some degree, that might be helpful if you're running a company, a business, even if being a pastor, it's helpful to sort of maybe anticipate what's coming next, but not be ruled and dominated by that, and to begin to develop good plans and schedules and routines that will help us again use the time well.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, so I want to give us now like 5 different categories, and I just want to hear you guys kind of kick around different ways that you can imagine or would encourage, particularly our brothers and sisters at IDC, to redeem the time, to be good stewards of this time in their lives. So the 5 categories are just personally, and their own just kind of personal walk with the Lord and personal development and faithfulness, family, church, what it looks like to be a part of the Christian community and the brothers and sisters at our church in particular, neighbors, and then professionally, right? So those are, we could probably add more, but those are the ones we'll try to hit right now. So Christy, why don't you start off and think just on a personal level, what does it look like to redeem the time from as an individual, as a Christ follower yourself?
Yeah. Well, sanctification is rapidly growing in our homes as we're all isolating. But I know for me personally, it's critical that I am in the Word like never before. Like I'm so much more aware of my need right now. And I'm more aware of the idols that this is revealing in my flesh. Not being able to find toilet paper one day, I was tempted to have a small panic attack in about 5 different stores, and really, understanding like there's a lot of fear and kind of getting to the root problem. So for me, the time in the Word is just non-negotiable, and it always is, but it just feels so critical right now. And memorizing Psalms, and I'm personally I'm reading like Lamentations, and some of the lament that's going on in these chapters have just been so good for my soul right now. So as I'm thinking through my own discipleship, it's what idols are coming out in me that maybe I was blind to. Like I'm real gracious. The Lord's been real gracious in revealing those, and then using Scripture as helping to see that sin revealed, giving me tools to fight it, just relying on His Spirit. But that comes from the Word. And so that's been my personal challenge right now, is non-negotiable, lots and lots of Word time.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's a really good point, because I think there might be some who are inclined to think, okay, everything is disrupted, all the routines are off, and like I'm not going anywhere. And so it may be counterintuitively, but some people might lean towards not emphasizing as many of those personal disciplines and just faithfulness and communion with the Lord because there's not stuff going on kind of in the everyday life as much. And I think it's an instructive word for us, is that like on some level now, just as much if not more than ever, we need to make sure we're on guard. Matt, anything you would add to that? You mentioned kind of even personal struggles there, like what, like with this season, what else would you add there?
Yeah, I think Christy touched on a number of the really important things. I think we should be mindful, again, of what the Scriptures teach us to number our days so that we would gain a heart of wisdom, and to make the best use of the time so that we would be wise with it. We see that in Ephesians 5:16 and Colossians 4:5. And so I think for each of us, that could look a little different. Working from home, being from home a lot, could be a temptation for some of us to either overwork or maybe not work as much as we should. So either to be the sluggard or, again, to overwork. And so I think we want to be mindful of those extremes. We need to work well if we're working from home, but not to an extreme. And we also need to be good, responsible employees and work our good day and put in that time. But I think we need to be mindful of that. Again, not to use our time foolishly and kind of self-indulgent ways. Perhaps, again, I touched on it earlier, being on the news too much, being on social media too much, watching too much Netflix. I mean, some of that is, again, enjoy your time at home with your family. We'll talk about that in a minute. But, just be mindful of how many hours you have in the day awake and how you're spending that time. Again, I think a good tool would be to organize your day. And your schedule for your day probably looks different than it used to. But have some kind of schedule and routine for yourself.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, both of you guys have families that are in very busy families usually, and then now they're all together. So what does it look like to just be good stewards of your family time during while you guys are all together? Matt, what? I know you put some thought into this. What do you think?
Yeah, we've had to. All of us here at home and doing different things. I've got college kids home. They're actually online right now, taking classes, doing work, all the way down to elementary school child who is we're trying to keep busy. I touched on it earlier. I think having a good routine and schedule for your family is really important. And maybe even like a Monday through Friday routine. What does the day look like for everybody in the family? One of those times you're kind of on your own doing your schoolwork or your work, and taking your shower or whatever. And then what are those times when the family's all together? And then when the family's all together, say maybe that's in the mornings, early in the mornings, in the evenings, how do you spend that time? So some things we've been doing as a family is we have watched a few TV shows as a family, a few movies. We've kind of rotated who gets to pick the show or the movie for the night, so it's not always one. We've been playing games. We've been doing puzzles. I'm sitting at our dining room table that has two puzzles on it right now, which is a good way to kind of sit. And I think the Britons have too. It's a good way to spend the time together as a family. We've taken a lot of walks, gotten outdoors in a, I think, responsible way, and really tried to enjoy this time together as a family. Even though we are on top of each other, literally in this house.
Right. I talked to somebody last night who was doing a 1,000-piece puzzle of a polar bear. Like the whole thing was just white. And I was like, that is the perfect puzzle for this time. Right
that's weak sauce right now, Shane. You need to go at least 2,000.
Covered.
Okay. I'll pass that along. You're not impressed with the polar bear.
I'm not impressed.
All right, Christy, what about you guys?
Sorry, I'm moving all the puzzle pieces away from me. I think children really thrive in structured environments. And so it's our responsibility as parents to provide that. And even thinking from the bigger picture, their world is really shaky right now. Yesterday they were in school, today they're homeschooled. Like it's a sharp contrast. And so one of the ways we can point them toward just the constancy of God and just the everlasting nature of his word is to provide order in our homes. And so, my kids, we have a schedule. We're not, I'm not a Nazi about it, but they're up, they're having their breakfast, they're getting dressed, chores, and then it's structured academic time. We have some workspaces, some makeshift we've thrown together, and some tables, because most of our tabletops are puzzled right now. So we're having to get real creative with where they do schoolwork. But then we take a break and we get outside, get some walks, get on the trampoline, whatever you have available to you. We have some chore time after lunch. Everybody's contributing to the good of the home. Afternoon looks a lot more structured. We're back into our school sort of rhythm. And then it's more outside time or walks, whatever it is. There's lots of puzzles, lots of books. We did get a free trial of Netflix just for the month. We're watching Lost in Space. So every night we sit down and watch 1 to 2 episodes, and then at night, we kind of separate and get a little distance, and they can do some reading or something before bed. But structure, it's critical right now to survive with sanity intact.
Yeah, excellent.
And I think, and Christy touched on this earlier, I think it's really important, again, to remind yourself, this is an opportunity. You're getting more time with your kids, with your spouse, or with others than you may normally, and that's a great opportunity to kind of maybe work on some relationship issues, to sit down and talk things out when you might normally be rushed, to invest time with your kids, to do a puzzle with them, to take a walk with them, whether it's one-on-one or maybe, with a couple of your kids. I think it's also important to invest in your marriage during this time. Again, it might look a little different, but you can still do a date night. What we did was, and this is more Shauna's idea than mine, so I give her credit, but we set up a folding table. Set up a folding table in our bedroom, and we cooked a nice dinner last Friday night, had a candle on the table, and basically did our own little cafe, and had our date night at home, and then of course threatened the kids to not bother us. But we you got to be creative, but there's ways I think during this time to spend one-on-one or time with your kids, with your spouse, and with others in your home.
That's good. Okay, let's move along. When it comes to being members of a church, what does it look like to be faithful and redeem this time, when this might be one of the ones that's kind of an opposite direction? Your families are pulled together. With your church family, you're actually pushed apart. And so how do we steward this time well as faithful members of the body? Christy, what are some of the things that you guys are trying to do?
Yeah, so the mandates of scripture still apply. Like, we're not on break. Like, this our time we're living in. And so for us, when we are talking with our children about how do we seek the welfare of others, how do we, participate in community, we just have to reimagine what that looks like right now, because neighbor love right now means staying the heck away from your neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one thing that we're involved in, we're constantly, every day, we kind of go through a different, maybe single person in our church to call and check on, or an older neighbor that we have in our church, just kind of making a list, going through a rotation. We are definitely Zooming a lot more with people. Even our children are kind of involved in discipleship with their friends as they can through Zoom. Leaving, muffins on the neighbors of doorsteps, doorsteps of neighbors, sorry. Just with a note, we're trying to find things we can do to love our community, but within the body, we're definitely being more connected with people intentionally through the phone, box, text, email, trying to see what those needs are. And, having groups that we pray with over Voxer, it looks differently. It's an extension of what we've been doing, but it's gone much more virtual. But teaching our kids to seek the welfare of others as part of community, I think there's a lot of opportunities there that we can do that.
That's good. That's good. Matt, anything you would add to just being good, faithful church members and stewards of this time?
Yeah. Again, I think it obviously looks a lot different right now. This is not ideal. It's not what we all desire in terms of how we are the church. But we can still be the church. I think one thing I would remind folks of is don't neglect the gathering. We are gathering together at 10 a.m. Sundays. If you're available, and you probably are, we want you to be a part of that. And even if it is virtual, and if you can't be, watch it back later. And I think most growth groups are going to be virtually meeting beginning this week, and so we would want you to join in on that. Don't let technology or anything like that be a barrier. Hopefully we're making it as easy as possible. And again, it's not ideal, but it's still really good. My group met last week virtually, and it was just really good to catch up, hear what's going on in people's lives, and even joke about the fact that we have to meet virtually. So just don't neglect the gathering. And Christy touched on this too. Stay in touch with people informally, whatever that looks like. And for the introverts out there, kind of sort of push back against your introversion and enjoying being alone too much, and make sure you're staying connected to people.
Yeah, that's good. I think I would just add that there's opportunity for discipleship to happen. So the gathering, but also just investing in one another. We talk about calling people, having phone conversations. A lot of folks like to have something that kind of facilitates a relationship. Read a book together, watch a movie and discuss it. I don't know, but just things that can facilitate conversation. Because digitally, we are in some ways kind of locked into just kind of sitting and talking to one another. You can still have something that can facilitate, study a passage, and then just come together and talk about what those observations were. So you can do that as a group. You can also do that as individuals, again, because people do have time, and this might slow us down enough to kind of pursue some intentional discipleship with one another, again, in an adjusted way. So we've already hit on a little bit on these, so I don't want to spend a whole lot of time, but other ways that we can care for our neighbors and just be faithful neighbors and representatives of Christ during this time. And then also professionally, Matt, you already mentioned not being a sluggard. Anything else you guys would add in those categories? I want to wrap up pretty quick, but anything else that really clearly falls into those categories that you want to hit on?
I'll talk. Go ahead, Christy.
I saw someone post a picture on Twitter where, everyone's posting pictures of empty toilet paper shelves in stores, but someone was in, I think, a Barnes and Noble, and the Bibles were wiped out. And so I think, there's an inherent search right now of, people are scared. They're wondering what's the purpose and the meaning in all this. And so we have a really unique opportunity with our scared and unbelieving neighbors to speak truth, perhaps across the fence right now, but to speak truth to them and to tell them the reason why we don't have to panic, while we have hope, while we trust a very constant and unchanging God in these uncertain times. So I think, if anything, that the conversation has gotten a little easier to have because people are inherently scared and searching. And so we can offer them something right now.
Yeah, that's good. Matt?
Yeah, I would just add to that, it's an opportunity to serve your neighbors as well. So be tuned in. People may be more open, more transparent. They may tell you more about what they're worried about right now than they would have a week ago. Doors are opening sort of metaphorically. And so just be asking questions, ask to pray for people, ask if they need anything, can you serve them? And that may just open a door to a further conversation, a gospel conversation, and serving your neighbor, loving them well. As far as professionally, the only couple things I would say, Shane, is if you do have a job, if you are kind of gainfully employed and working full time, just work as unto the Lord. Work hard, do your job well. That glorifies God. He's pleased with that, and obviously you're helping your neighbor by doing that well. And so just work hard. Don't fall into kind of the trap or temptation of maybe working less hard, or even be thankful in that you do have a good job. I think it's a time to do that. Perhaps maybe you took it for granted. Please don't. If you are out of work, please let somebody know at the church. Let an elder, let a growth group leader, let us know what's going on. And we want to help you and help you get working again, but also just kind of help you through this time. So just let us know if that's going on.
Excellent. Yeah, that's super helpful. Super helpful. Along the neighbors line, I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they were walking in their neighborhood, and they met an older couple that were out, and they just from across the fence or whatever, said that they were super bored. And so later on, she went back and she wrote a note and left it on their doorstep, and she said that they were going to become pen pals or something like that. I just thought that was a really great example, kind of creative way of just kind of loving on them, trying to care for them, encourage them, but also open herself to them and say, hey, if you need anything, let me know. So I was super encouraged by that. And I'm sure there's lots of folks in our church who are doing things like that. Okay, I'm going to call it there. Thank you guys so much for the time. I'm sure that we could talk a lot more about this kind of stuff, and we'll probably run into a lot more kind of unique challenges as time goes on. But we can revisit if needed. But in the meantime, I think this would be a helpful starting place of this conversation. So appreciate you guys' time, and we'll see you guys later eventually.
Thanks.
So yeah, thanks, Shane.